I had been retired long enough that my hands no longer shook when I slept. That was my measure of time. Not the pension papers filed and forgotten. Not the medals sealed away in a drawer I never opened. Not the polite nods from men who once outranked me and now sold insurance. Just that simple thing. Stillness. When sleep came, my body no longer rehearsed old violence in its muscles. No sudden clenching of fists. No waking with breath caught halfway between panic and command. Dreams had changed too. They used to arrive whole, heavy, complete with terrain and objectives and blood. Now they came broken, harmless, a grocery list, the wrong brand of coffee, rain starting without warning, ordinary fragments that meant nothing and asked nothing of me. That was how I knew the work was done. I lived quietly because quiet is earned. I fixed what broke. Loose hinges, leaking pipes, the feeder pole that leaned too far after winter storms. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't correct people unless it mattered. I learned the names of birds that came to the feeder at dawn. The nervous finches, the aggressive jays, the one stubborn woodpecker who refused to be intimidated by anything. I learned their habits the way I once learned patrol routes, not to dominate them, just to understand the pattern of things. When my daughter called, I listened more than I spoke. That took practice. Listening is harder than talking when you've spent a lifetime giving orders. But it mattered. She told me about her job, the small frustrations, the way her boss used the word family to justify unpaid overtime. I asked questions that didn't sound like interrogations. I learned to let silence exist between us without rushing to fill it. That was the work I chose after the other work ended. The hospital smelled like metal and soap, the way all hospitals do when they're trying to convince you that cleanliness is control. Machines kept time the way metronomes do, steady, indifferent, precise, without caring what they counted or why. They beeped and hummed and sighed, recording data that could never capture fear. My daughter lay in the bed too still. Her face was swollen in a way that made her look younger, softer, as if time had folded in on itself and given me back a version of her I thought was gone forever. There were fingerprints on her arms, darker than the rest of her skin, clear enough that even someone who didn't know how to look could see them. I knew exactly how much pressure it took to leave marks like that. I knew how long they would last. A nurse spoke to me gently, too gently, the way people do when they don't know what you are capable of but sense something sharp beneath the surface. She explained procedures I already understood, asked if I needed water, asked if someone could come sit with me. I thanked her and declined. I stayed where I was. I did not cry. Crying is not a failure, but it is a release, and I did not want release. I sat. I watched my daughter's chest rise and fall. Inhale. Exhale. I counted the seconds between breaths without meaning to. I made myself memorize the pattern, as if it might be taken away if I didn't. As if attention alone could anchor her to the bed. The call came that afternoon. Unknown number. I answered because I always do. Avoidance is a habit for people who think safety comes from hiding. His voice was calm, confident, practiced, the kind of voice that had been obeyed for most of his life and expected obedience as a default. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. Men like him believe names are unnecessary because consequences flow in only one direction. Your daughter disrespected my boy, he said. No hesitation. No apology. She'll learn her place. I said nothing. Silence is not absence. Silence is a tool. I have used it to make men talk when they should have stayed quiet, to make them doubt conclusions they reach too quickly, to make them fill empty space with their own mistakes. This time I used it to listen, to the rhythm of his breathing, to the certainty baked into his assumptions, to the way he believed I shared his rules simply because I had answered the phone. He waited a few seconds, then hung up, satisfied. Men like him mistake lack of response for lack of capacity. I stayed in the chair by my daughter's bed until evening. When she stirred, her eyes didn't focus at first. Pain does that, it narrows the world to a tunnel with no edges. She whispered my name like it was a question, unsure if it would be answered. I took her hand. Her fingers were cold. I told her she was safe. It was not a promise. It was an assessment. On the drive home, Memory pressed in without asking permission. Not the worst of it. Not the screams or the smells or the moments that still wake men older than me in the middle of the night. Just the practical things. Routes. Timing. The way security is never about strength, only habit. The way men confuse money with insulation, as if wealth itself could absorb consequence. I did not tell myself a story about revenge. Stories are for people who need to justify what they already want to do. I told myself the truth. This would not end unless someone ended it. The system would move slowly if it moved at all. Paper would change hands. Meetings would be scheduled. Apologies would be drafted and never delivered. The boy's father had built his life on delay. Delay is a kind of power if you can afford it. I prepared the way I always had, methodically, without anger. Anger is expensive. It wastes motion. I had fewer tools now, different ones. Age teaches you efficiency if nothing else. It strips away the unnecessary. The estate sat where wealth always sits. Removed, elevated, convinced of its own permanence. Long driveway, manicured hedges that hid more than they decorated. Cameras watching the perimeter with the lazy confidence of systems that had never truly been tested. Guards walked predictable paths. They were paid to intimidate, not to imagine. That distinction matters. I did not fight them. Fighting is loud and imprecise. It announces itself. I interrupted routines instead. I redirected attention. A gate opened when it shouldn't have. A light failed at the wrong moment. Radios crackled and died mid-sentence. One by one, men found themselves restrained, disarmed, confused, alive. Some ran when they realized resistance would cost them more than compliance. Some froze, unable to reconcile training with reality. None died by my hand. Death was not the point. Inside, the house was too large to feel like a home. Marble absorbs sound. It makes footsteps dishonest, robs them of intention. The walls were decorated with art chosen to signal taste rather than joy. No photographs that weren't staged. No evidence of warmth that hadn't been purchased. The father was in his office, exactly where he believed himself safest. He stood when he saw me, outrage already forming, authority reaching for familiar shapes. Up close, he looked older than I expected. Power does that. It consumes you while convincing you it's nourishment. I did not lecture him. Lectures are for people who think they are teaching. I told him what was already true. That warrants had been filed. That accounts had been flagged in ways his accountants could not unwind quickly enough. That evidence had been delivered to people who could not be bought cheaply or quietly. I had not created his downfall. I had simply removed the insulation and let gravity do the rest. He laughed at first. It was reflexive, brittle. Then he reached for a phone that did not work. That moment when certainty collapses into comprehension is always quieter than people expect. Sirens came sooner than he had calculated. Authority has a sound when it arrives, inescapable, final. The kind that does not negotiate. When the doors opened and voices filled the hall, control shifted in a way even he could understand. I stepped back. My role was already finished. The son woke up later, tied to a chair in a room that smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and fear. He was bruised from earlier sins, not from me. His eyes moved too fast, scanning for exits that didn't exist. He was not a stupid man, just a careless one, raised to believe limits were theoretical. I leaned close enough that he could hear me without my voice rising. Lesson 1, I said. You don't touch my daughter. I did not threaten him. Threats imply future interaction. I explained consequences instead. That the world he thought protected him had edges he had never bothered to look for. That pain is not the only teacher. Sometimes it's memory. Sometimes it's the knowledge that no one is coming, not because they can't, but because they won't. I left him there to be found. Alive, shaken, educated. By morning, the house was full of people who did not belong to it. Men with badges. Men with gloves. Voices echoing where arrogance used to live. The estate lost its weight. Buildings do that when the stories propping them up collapse. My daughter recovered. Slowly. Bodies heal faster than trust. She did not ask what I had done. I did not volunteer it. We spoke about other things. About her job. About the way sleep comes in waves now, never all at once. About the birds she remembered from when she was young. There is distance between us that wasn't there before. I accept it. Protection can look like control, even when it isn't meant to be. I am learning still how to be only a father. I returned to my quiet life. The feeder needed fixing again. The birds came back. My hands stayed steady. I do not feel victorious. Victory implies competition. I feel finished with that chapter at least. The past is still inside me. It always will be. But it does not speak unless spoken to. And I am careful now about the conversations I allow.